Welcome back to Frenchy's Forge. In today's episode, we're turning this almost completely wasted billet, aka trash, into a beautiful knife. We left off last episode with forging out the billet, grinding in the bevels, and this is where we're at. I'm just showing that the blade has a bit of a delamination. And that's kind of where we left it last episode. So we're picking up here with doing some thermocycling, and you can really see the heat starting to move into the blade, and in that shot you can see the difference in between the two metals. This next clip I thought would be really cool to keep in the video because it shows the thermocycling process, and it really highlights what it looks like when you don't have a perfect forge weld. You can see that dark spot there, and that really does indicate that the forge weld isn't complete and there's a delamination. And for newer knife makers, that's something to look out for. You should be able to tell before you get to this point, but in case you can't, we'll zoom in here and take a look. It's just those little dark areas, and that means that the piece of steel is cooling down at a different rate, and it pretty much just means that the two metals aren't attached. Here I am preheating the oil with a railroad spike, and I don't always do this, but this particular day was a little cool outside, and I'm thinking the oil was a little too cool to quench in, so I went ahead and heated that up. And prior to this clip here, I wrapped the blade in wire and furnace cement before I quenched it. And I'm really glad that I chose to do that. My thinking was if I protect all three layers, the stainless cladding and then the 1080 core, that it would help to keep it from splitting apart. A lot of people doing San Mai, especially stainless San Mai, have that problem during the quench. The core tends to split right down the middle due to the different cooling rates of the steel. But to my surprise, once I get it unwrapped and check it out, it looks really good. We still have those delaminations, but I'm pretty much calling it at this point and thinking that we can work through it. Once we make it back into the shop, I am looking at this thing and realizing that the delaminations aren't as bad as I thought they were. And I originally was going to make this a full flat ground knife in hopes that it would get rid of those delaminations, but I decided against it. I did thin it out quite a bit, and I ended up just kind of keeping it as it is. Now, the delaminations aren't as bad as they were after the quench. There's still a little bit of a crack in the blade, but it's really pretty shallow and minimal. I decided to put in a false edge on the tip of this blade, and my thinking here is not functionality, it's more so for the etching effect. I really thought it would be cool after etching it to see that 1080 core kind of wrap around the tip, and a really good way to achieve that look is by putting in a false edge. So that's what I'm doing here with my little homemade file guide. Now that I have the majority of the blade portion finished, I move on to working on the handle. And most of these steps I've shown and discussed and talked about in previous videos, but I at least thought I would throw on a short clip of some of the steps to get us to a complete knife. This wood that I'm about to cut up here is called Black Limba, and it's a newer wood for me. It's a really pretty piece of wood. It looks kind of plain on this side, but you'll get to see the other side when I flip it over and show it as a completed knife handle. It's just a really cool piece of wood. Anyway, we'll cut it back on here when we get towards the end of this build. Enjoy. Now, because this is stainless San Mai, my etching process was a little bit different than normal. I only left it in the ferric chloride for probably 30 seconds tops. And you can see that it's doing a really good job of etching this thing super fast. And once I have it in the ferric chloride for half a minute or so, I move it straight into the baking soda water to neutralize the acid. And once we're done with that step, we pretty much are going to go to instant coffee for the rest of the darkening. I think I had this blade in the coffee for maybe an hour, maybe two tops, and that's really all it needed. It darkened up quite well in that short amount of time. Once you pull it out of the coffee, this is kind of the important step. You really don't want to wipe it or touch it. You want to use compressed air from a air compressor, or in my case, I'm cheap and don't have one, so I use a crappy leaf blower, but some way to get the blade clean and blow the coffee off. And once the blade is dry, it then kind of sets those oxides in, and I use mineral oil only because that's all I have. Some people use wax like carnauba wax or beeswax or different knife making pastes, but I don't have any of that stuff. I find that mineral oil works just as well, and you can see I'm wiping the mineral oil all over the blade, and you don't really have a ton of that oxide coming off. So for the most part, the process is pretty good, and that's typically what I do, especially on some of the Damascus that I've done. And what's cool is once you're done wiping it down with the mineral oil, you pretty much get it to where there's no oxides coming off, but it gets rid of that leftover coffee tinge that's left on the blade. And really just kind of wiping it down and rubbing in the oil is really all I did to kind of finish this thing out. But once we have the mineral oil applied, we get to take kind of a closer look at the finished part of the blade, and it looks really good. I'm actually impressed with the blade itself and just stainless San Mai in general. I think it is really cool. You can see the carbon migration right here from the high carbon steel moving into the stainless there, and I think you would have seen it the whole way through had we not had that delamination there. But it's just really interesting. You can really see where the metal kind of moves in between the two types of metal. And again, on the other side, you get a little bit of it here and there, and it just looks really cool. If you look close, you can actually see a really faint silver line that follows the stainless, and it's just a cool blade and just something that you could spend a lot of time looking at. Well, there you have it. The very first stainless San Mai that I have ever hand forged. And for almost being a failure, I think that this thing turned out really good. Just the overall look of it is wicked cool. It's got a really nice piece of handle material on it. It almost looks like two different knives. You know, the just the plain color wood on this side, and it just looks almost completely different on this side. This black limba is definitely a cool species of wood. This is almost an orange kind of tint with black and brown in it. Definitely a cool chunk of wood and something that I'll be using again. I've got G10 for the little guard or bolster piece, and I feel like that worked out pretty good for this. Kind of ties all the black bits in throughout the knife. Anyway, I'm really happy with the way this turned out. Hopefully you guys got some useful information from this video and you got to see the finished product. Not only did we start with almost a complete failure of a billet, I really was considering chucking this and trying something else, but I'm glad I stuck it out and gave it a chance. I really do think that the furnace cement definitely helped when we went to quench, kind of keeping it all together during that part. And once we made it past that, it was kind of business as usual. But let me know what you think in the comments below. Really appreciate you guys checking this one out. And we'll do some close-ups of this knife here out in the sunlight so you can take a better look. For now, Frenchy